The present doesn't exist. You're reading this now, right? But what is now exactly? Hold on to that thought, freeze it. Try to pin it down like a butterfly to a board. There it is, the present moment, or was it? It's already gone. Try again. Again. Each time you grip the present, it slips through your fingers like fine sand, like light on water, like a memory you're sure you lived, but can no longer prove. This is your first paradox. The present doesn't exist. You are taught, comfortably, that time flows like a river. There's the past, behind you, the future, up ahead, and the present, that sacred, shimmering sliver in between. But what if that sliver isn't real at all? Look around you, everything you see is already past. Light takes time to reach your eyes. Sound takes time to vibrate through air. Even your own thoughts, neurons firing, signals sparking, take milliseconds to register. You never experience now, you only experience the delay. In neuroscience, this is called the perceptual present, a strange buffer zone your brain constructs, a few hundred milliseconds wide. But it's a lie, a smoothing illusion, because if your brain didn't stitch the world together, you'd be left in fragmented darkness, staring at a world that has already happened, unable to catch up. Let's test it. Clap your hands. Feel that impact. Hear that sound. Now, pause. The sensation on your palms, the echo in your ears, the memory in your mind, they're all from a different time, microseconds apart, and your brain, desperate for coherence, told you it was all now, but it wasn't. You are always behind, always late, always experiencing a ghost of the present. Philosophy tries to pin this down too. Presentism, the belief that only the present is real, collapses under scrutiny. If the present exists right now, then it must have a defined boundary. But how thin can a moment be before it disappears entirely? A second, a millisecond, a Planck time? In physics, the Planck time is the smallest measurable slice of existence, 539 x 10 to 44 seconds. Any smaller, and time ceases to be a meaningful concept. But even this quantum heartbeat isn't the present, you know. It's still a unit, still before and after, still part of a timeline. So where's the now in all that? Imagine you're walking across a tightrope. Every step you take, the rope disappears behind you and reappears in front. There's no solid ground beneath, no present holding you, just memory and anticipation. The rest is void. What happens then if the present is only a hallucination? Maybe the present is just a threshold, a transition point between the known and the unknown. A blur, not a place to stand, but a blur you fall through, endlessly, never stopping, never arriving. Some physicists argue that the flow of time itself is an illusion, that past, present, and future all coexist, frozen in a four-dimensional block called the block universe. In this model, your entire life is laid out like film frames on a reel. You don't move through time. You are merely watching a movie that's already complete. And yet, you still feel movement. Why? Could it be that consciousness is not a passenger, save time but a projector? That the illusion of a present moment is the result of awareness sweeping across a static universe? And if that's true, then who is doing the sweeping? Who or what is you? The moment you try to define the present, it breaks into before and after. Try it again. Say, now. It's already past. Say it louder, slower. Too late. You're chasing shadows in a hall of mirrors. Imagine a room with two doors, one marked before, the other after. You're told the present lies in between. But when you walk through, you find only fog. No walls, no floor, just echoes. Footsteps behind, whispers ahead. You call it now, but it is nothing. And yet you build your life on this lie. You make decisions, take risks, love, regret, all on a platform that doesn't even exist, like trying to balance on a tightrope made of wind. You say, I exist in the present, but if the present doesn't exist, do you? So ask yourself, what are you standing on if the ground beneath your mind is always gone by the time you notice it? Zeno's arrow, you're standing still, and yet you are always moving. But what if motion itself is an illusion? Here's a paradox old enough to have haunted the minds of ancient philosophers, yet eerie enough to fracture your sense of space. And self today, Zeno's arrow. Imagine an arrow soaring through the air. You freeze time. In each frozen instant, the arrow occupies a single point in space. In that moment, it is motionless. It does not move. Now unfreeze time and stack those moments together, millisecond upon millisecond, each frame still. So how, Zeno asked, can something that is motionless at every point ever be said to move? And suddenly your heartbeat slows, because you begin to see the terror in the question. Take a walk across your room. From point A to point B, your foot rises, floats, lands. But where? Where exactly did motion happen? Stop. Hands zoom in on the act. You divide the journey in half, then divide that half, then that half, and again and again. And again. With each cut, your movement is reduced to a stillness, a frame, until your step becomes nothing but a collection of infinitely still points. No blur, no flow, just position after position after position. And yet you arrived. Didn't. You, Zeno of Elea, posed this in the 5th century BCE, not to be cute, not to be clever, but to rupture the way we trust the senses, to split the fabric of movement, to suggest something horrifying, that the world doesn't move and neither do you. Mathematics tried to save us. Calculus, centuries later, introduced the idea of limits. Yes, they said, a journey can have infinite divisions but still total a finite length. But the deeper you go, the darker it gets, because if motion is just the derivative of position over time, what happens when time is sliced into atoms? When the smallest instant is too small to measure, too small to matter, what is left? No motion, no change, no travel, just static images, blinking in and out. Imagine your entire life, one still moment, then another, then another. You were never walking. You were a slideshow, and something else. Something outside of time, outside of you, was clicking the projector forward. But who is clicking? Let's flip the nightmare. What if your mind is the arrow? In every frozen moment of consciousness, are you truly thinking? Or is the self you believe in just the memory of past stillness, stitched together to create the illusion of flow? Think of your dreams. They feel like they move. They stretch hours into seconds, but they are still, they are flickers. So is this? Are you dreaming now? You sit in your chair, you breathe, but your body is just a location in space. Your breath is just expansion at a point in time. Remove movement and all that remains is frame still. Alone, you might argue, but I feel movement. I experience motion. Yes, but you also feel warmth in a dream. You hear voices that aren't there. Your brain is a master forger, and it has never stopped lying to you. Even in physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, there is no true consensus on the nature of motion. Particles don't move the way we imagine them to. They jump, they smear. They exist in probability clouds until observed. An electron doesn't go anywhere. It simply appears elsewhere. And so do you. Take your memories. Can you recall every step you took this morning? Or do you remember 2 points, awake and at work, and assume the rest? How much of your day is filled in by the mind's painterly hand? Now imagine every time you blink you are a new version of yourself, spawned at the next coordinate, convinced you've been in motion, but really, you've just appeared, over and over. Motion is a story, and like all stories, it is constructed. And like all constructions, it can crumble. Zeno's arrow whispers to you across time, you do not move, you are moved. A puppet on invisible strings of perception, an arrow that never leaves the bow, and still, somewhere inside, you resist. You want to feel motion, to believe it's real, to believe that your progress matters, that you're not just reliving the illusion of action in an unmoving cage. So tell me, if every moment is frozen, who is watching the movie? And are they watching you, or are you the one watching them? The Ship of Theseus, if every cell in your body has changed, every thought rearranged, every piece of you replaced over time, are you still you? Welcome to the Ship of Theseus, a paradox not just of identity, but of terrifying temporal erosion. Imagine a ship, a legendary vessel battered by sea and salt, cherished for generations. One day a rotted plank is replaced, then another, a sail, the mast. Piece by piece every component is swapped out, until after years, not a single original part remains. And now the question, is it still the same ship? If it is, what defines its continuity? If it isn't, at what exact moment did it stop being itself? Now imagine that every plank of the original ship was kept in a warehouse. Over time, those parts are carefully reassembled, creating a new ship made entirely from the original materials. Now, which is the real Ship of Theseus? The one that carried the soul of its voyage, or the one made of its authentic body? Both neither. Now, breathe. Because you are the ship. Every 7 years, nearly every atom in your body has been replaced. Your bones regenerate, your skin molts, your blood renews, even your brain rewires itself constantly. The patterns of thought you had 10 years ago, gone. The ideas you loved 5 years ago, you might hate now, but you still call yourself I. Still wear your name like armor, still cling to the illusion of continuity. But if all the parts have changed, what has remained? This paradox isn't just a question of metaphysics. It's a direct assault on your sense of self. Your childhood self, was that you? Or a stranger you carry like a ghost? Think back to a memory. Pick a moment, age 5 perhaps. You stood in the garden. Your hands were sticky with juice. The sun hit your eyes just right. And in that moment, you were you, but if your brain, your thoughts, your voice, your cells, if everything has changed, what part of you still claims that memory? Maybe it was never your memory to begin with. Maybe it was just a flicker in a machine you now inhabit. Or maybe identity is nothing but a persistent story told by an unreliable narrator. Now take it further. Let's say we copied every piece of you, digitally. Your memories, your voice, your quirks, your fears. We load that into a machine. It speaks like you, thinks like you. It believes it is you. Is it? And if not, why not? Where do you draw the line between self and simulation? Between continuity and coincidence? You begin to see it, don't you? Time doesn't erode you, it replaces you quietly, layer by layer, until you are a museum of former selves, a gallery of echoes. But the most disturbing thought? You, the voice in your head reading this, might be nothing more than a placeholder, a temporary captain on a ship that has already left the dock. You'll be gone soon, replaced by another you, one who won't remember reading this, one who will call you past self like a grave marker. You are not a being. You are a transition, an arrangement, and arrangements can be changed. Imagine waking up tomorrow the same way you always do, but without any memory of who you were today. New values, new thoughts, and yet you'd still call yourself by your name, still wear your clothes, still occupy the same apartment. Would you notice the difference? Would anyone? In that case, identity becomes a performance, a role passed down between versions of a self, like actors inheriting a character. One day you are the grieving son, another the ambitious worker, then the lover, then the stranger, then the memory someone else has of you after you're gone. So, ask yourself, if the mind is rebuilt every moment, who or what is doing the remembering? And if that answer escapes you, as it should, then perhaps the person reading this sentence was never really you at all. The Bootstrap Paradox: a man receives a book. No title, no author, just dense handwritten instructions. He studies it, masters it, builds a machine based on its blueprints. Decades later, old and withered, he travels back in time and gives that book to his younger self. So here's the question. Who wrote the book? Welcome to the Bootstrap Paradox, a riddle that mocks the very idea of causality. It tears time into a loop and forces you to stare into a mirror with no reflection behind it. This paradox doesn't just bend the rules of reality, it suggests there are no rules, not really. Just illusions of order wrapped around a void of recursion. Let's walk through it. Suppose a scientist invents a time machine using plans he received from an unknown source. He uses it, travels back, and delivers those plans to his past self. His past self then grows up, builds the machine, and repeats the cycle, again and again. No beginning, no origin, just an idea that exists without ever being created. A closed loop. A self-sustaining bubble of logic that somehow defies the need for a source. And now the horror. This loop has no entry point. The machine exists, the plans exist, but no one ever invented it. So where did the knowledge come from? Maybe the universe allows it. Maybe causality can eat its own tail, but more likely we've misunderstood the very nature of existence, because if something can exist without a beginning, then what else can? Could you? Your thoughts, your fears, your identity? Could those too be echoes with no origin? Ghosts in a loop you can't remember starting. Pause. Now ask, when did you begin? Not your birth, not your first memory, but you, the inner narrative voice that just asked that question. Where did that begin? Was it given to you? Or did you hand it to yourself from some forgotten future? What if your thoughts are not entirely yours? What if your dreams, ambitions, instincts are ideas you've inherited from yourself, from a version of you that no longer exists? Or one that hasn't happened yet? Recursive identity, self-looping will, a consciousness that bootstraps its own existence. Take language, for instance. You learned to speak because someone taught you, but they learned it from someone else, and them from another. And somewhere in that chain, a first speaker had to invent it, right? But what if there never was a first? What if language just appeared? What if the first word was taught by the last? You might think, that's impossible. But in closed systems of time, impossibility folds into probability. There is no before or after. There's only is, was, will be, all coiled into one. Your memories of the past, maybe they were planted by the future. Your gut feeling, maybe it's a nudge from yourself, reaching backward through time. In physics, this idea isn't just science fiction. The Novikov self-consistency principle suggests that events in time loops must be internally consistent. No paradoxes, no contradictions. Whatever happens must always happen. So in a loop, the book always appears. The inventor always invents it, even if no one ever actually did, just as you always become who you are now. Even if that person has no defined beginning, and if the loop can't be broken, are you free? Is free will possible in a closed circuit? If your actions are echoes of your own future decisions, then who is in charge? The Bootstrap Paradox isn't just about machines and timelines. It's about you. It's about realizing that everything you think of as linear, as progressive, as earned, might be the result of a circle too vast to see. Maybe your destiny isn't written in the stars. Maybe you wrote it yourself, and then forgot. So here's a thought that should keep you awake tonight. If something can exist without origin, can it also vanish without cause? And if so, what part of you might disappear next, without ever having been real in the first place? The Omphalos Paradox in the beginning. There was no beginning. Now sit with that. You find yourself in a garden, ancient, silent, suspended in perfection. In the center stands a tree, ripe with fruit. You pluck an apple, bite, sweet. But here's the riddle. Did that apple grow there? Or was it created in place, already ripe, already bitten by time? This is the Omphalos Paradox, named after the Greek word omphalos, meaning navel. It asks a question that corrodes the roots of history. If something is created to look old, is it old? The original formulation comes from theology. Imagine a divine being creates the universe in an instant. A garden, a man, a woman, trees, rivers, bones buried in the earth, light from distant stars mid-journey, a complete cosmos fabricated with a built-in illusion of age. Now, how would we ever know? If the world was created 5 seconds ago, with your memories, scars, regrets, and search history perfectly intact, what evidence could you use to disprove it? You can't. Every proof, every fossil, every clock tick you hold dear could have been planted, fabricated, mimicked by a force beyond time. This isn't just fantasy. It's a cancer of logic that infects every effort to prove reality. Because if the evidence for age can be fabricated, then age itself becomes meaningless. Let's look at yourself. You have a navel, a scar from birth. proof you were once connected to a mother. But what if that navel is just an illusion, a placeholder? If a perfect replica of you was created this moment, memories, fingerprints, traumas included, how would you distinguish yourself from that version? What if you are that version? You assume a past because you remember it, but memories are easy to fake. Just ask your dreams, or your hallucinations, or your childhood stories, warped and colored by time. You cling to continuity as comfort. But continuity can be installed. Let's extend the paradox. Astronomers observe light from stars millions of light years away. That means the universe must be millions of years old, right? But what if the light was created mid-flight? What if the entire sky is a simulation, a movie that started already in progress? It feels absurd, blasphemous even, to suggest this. But that's the point of the Omphalos Paradox. It dares to ask the one question that poisons all certainty. What if the beginning was faked? And once you open that door, nothing is safe. History books, scripted, your trauma, implanted, your achievements, pre-written, the person you became. Not the product of time, but the performance of an origin story fed to you as comfort. Maybe you never changed. Maybe you were sculpted as is, complete with regrets and wrinkles, doubts and dreams. An actor dropped onto a stage already set ablaze, and now you start to feel it, the dislocation, the gentle tilt in your perception. Because the moment you doubt the origin of anything, you create an infinite regress. Where did it begin? That's the horror. It didn't. It just appeared, like you did. Now, but the paradox doesn't end with cosmic trickery. It slithers into your sense of self. How do you know you've grown? Because you feel different, or because the story of your past self feels real? And if the story is real, but the timeline isn't, who exactly are you pretending to be? Every second you remember, every chapter you recall, could be a backstory fabricated by an originless universe desperate to make sense of itself, and you're its narrator, trapped in the illusion of memory, performing a life you never actually lived. So now ask yourself, if reality was planted 5 minutes ago, with all your thoughts pre-installed, how would you ever know? The double life paradox. Imagine waking up tomorrow to a knock at the door. You open it, and standing there is you, same face, same voice, same memories, but they claim to be the real you and say you are the copy. They remember everything. Your birthday, your childhood, the scar on your right hand. They even remember opening the door just like you're doing now. How would you prove you're the original? This is the double life paradox, a brutal challenge to identity, memory, and time. Because if two versions of you exist, both with perfect continuity, then who owns the life? Which timeline is true? And how many others are running in parallel? Let's rewind. Science fiction has toyed with clones and replicas for decades. But the real horror lies not in duplication, it lies in equivalence. Two versions of you, each convinced they are real, each with access to identical memories, dreams, regrets. But only one is standing in the original timeline. Or is that just another lie? You see, this paradox isn't just a hypothetical, it's already happening right now. Every time you imagine a different version of your life, what if you'd taken the other job? What if you'd said yes? What if you never came back home? A version of you splits off. In your mind, a shadow life begins, and over time those imagined versions become vivid. They haunt you in the quiet moments. They speak to you through regret. They become realer than your current self. And sometimes, you wonder if the real you took the wrong path. Or worse, if the version you became is the imposter. So tell me, are you the person you were meant to be? Or did that version fall asleep years ago and never wake up? Let's go deeper. Imagine two copies of you made at the same moment. They begin identical, but from that moment on they diverge. One eats breakfast, one doesn't. One smiles at a stranger. One walks past. 1,000 differences bloom like cracks in glass. After a week, they are two different people. But who changed first? Where is the you in that drift? Is it in memory, in decision, in time, or is identity simply an illusion? Stretched across diverging paths? Now return to your own life. Think of every forgotten fork in the road, every little decision you don't remember making, the day you wore blue instead of black, the day you turned left instead of right. Are those forgotten choices the reason this version of you exists, instead of another? And if that's true, then your life is a series of silent erasures, versions of you snuffed out, never chosen. But where did they go? Maybe they still exist in parallel, watching you, waiting for you to make the wrong move. To swap places, it gets worse, because if you are just one version out of many, then time becomes a hall of mirrors. Each reflection thinks it's the real one, each locked in its own bubble of now. You might think you've lived only one life, but how many others have lived you? How many timelines carried your voice, your fears, your name, only to be abandoned when another path was chosen? And what if, just once, you remembered both? Imagine a sliver of memory from a life you didn't live, a stranger's face that feels familiar, a building you've never entered that feels like home. Déjà vu. Maybe that's not a glitch, maybe it's a bleed-through, a crack in the partition between versions, and maybe, just maybe, the copy is you. Reading this now, trying to remember, a version of yourself that no longer exists. Because that's the final horror of the double life paradox. You will never know if you're the original, and worse, it doesn't matter. If every copy believes it's real, then none of them are. And the concept of authentic self becomes nothing more than theater, played on infinite stages. So ask yourself, if you are one version among many, how would you know this isn't someone else's life that you've simply taken over? The memory implant. Paradox. You wake up in a small room. Your hands are trembling. Your mind is full. Memories of childhood, a first kiss, a heartbreak, a face you've seen before but can't quite place. But there's a note on the table. It reads, "None of this is real. Your memories were installed 7 minutes ago. You laugh, dismiss it. You remember your mother's voice, don't you? You know your name. You remember learning how to drive, the taste of your favorite food, the smell of rain on concrete. But what if every one of those memories was just data?" This is the memory implant paradox, where the terror isn't that your past is wrong. It's that it may have never existed at all, because memory is the bedrock of identity. It's how you know who you are. It's how you justify your existence. But what if memory is nothing more than a suggestion, perfectly planted? Think about it. Every moment you live becomes a memory milliseconds later, but you can't touch it. You can't return to it. You can only trust it, and trust can be manipulated. Neuroscience has shown how disturbingly easy it is to implant false memories. Not just confuse someone, not just trick them. You can make someone genuinely remember being lost as a child in a mall, when it never happened. You can make them cry over events that didn't occur, feel pain for a trauma that was scripted, miss a person who never existed. Memory is not a tape recorder. It is a rewritable hallucination, sculpted by emotion, bias, suggestion, and you base everything on it. So here's the crack in the wall. If one memory can be fabricated, what about all of them? If your first heartbreak was installed, if your childhood best friend never lived, if your entire biography was input in one sitting, how would you know you'd still feel it, still cry, still smile at nostalgic songs that never actually played? Because memory doesn't need to be true to feel real. It only needs to be yours. Now let's make it darker. Imagine a being born with a complete set of implanted memories, 30 years worth. They awaken in a body. They have tastes, preferences, phobias, dreams. They remember having a past. They believe they've lived. But biologically, they are one day old. Are they less real? What about you? How do you know you weren't born 10 minutes ago? Memories fully installed, caught mid-story. You don't. You can't. Because every attempt to verify your past uses the very tool in question, your memory. Try it. Think of the most vivid, crystal clear memory you have. Now to consider this. What if you've only remembered it since yesterday, or worse? What if it was placed there as a trap to stop you from asking questions? Even your skepticism is suspect, Because a truly successful memory implant doesn't just give you false recollections, it gives you the confidence that they're real. You become your own jailer, guarding a prison made of shadows. Now take it a step further. You remember reading the earlier paradoxes, don't you? You remember this descent through thought traps. You feel the build-up, the unease. But what if you didn't? What if every section, before this one, was installed the moment you began reading this sentence? What if this is where it all started, and everything else is just a support structure, an elegant lie stitched together to keep you from noticing the blankness that came before? Even worse, what if someone else is installing them? Not a god, not an alien, but another version of you, looping back in time, replanting memories, trying again and again to fix something broken in your own timeline, each version slightly different, each memory tailored, each experience pre-written for a role you didn't know you were playing. You're not remembering a life, you're performing one. So here's your final thought. For now, if memory is a tool that can be programmed, are you the programmer or just the program? And if you are only what you remember, then what happens when someone rewrites your past while you're still inside it? The paradox of choice: you walk into a white room, lined wall to wall with doors. Each door is labeled with a different future. Love, success, fame, solitude, revenge, peace. All you have to do is choose one, but every time you reach for the handle, you pause. What if the next one is better? Welcome to the paradox of choice, where freedom becomes a trap, and decision itself dissolves into dread. We are taught that more choices mean more freedom. That possibility equals power. That autonomy equals truth. But when options multiply, when time stretches endlessly with parallel futures, you don't feel free. You feel paralyzed, because every choice is also a death. The moment you pick one path, you bury the rest, and you know it, you feel it. Each decision splits the timeline, a fracture, a goodbye, and suddenly, you're grieving versions of yourself that will never exist. Let's test it. Imagine your life as a flowchart, at every node a decision, at every edge a consequence. Now zoom out. You'll see thousands, millions, infinite timelines, versions of you who are artists, athletes, monks, criminals, widowers, ghosts. But here's the curse. You only get to live one, and know about the rest. The knowledge of alternate paths is not a gift. It's a mirror you can't stop looking into, a mirror that shows you all the selves you abandoned, and time, cruel and steady, keeps pushing you forward, forcing more decisions. You try to delay, you rationalize, you ask friends for advice, you scroll, compare, overthink, and in doing so you rot in the center of your own maze. This is decision fatigue. This is option paralysis. This is the moment freedom folds in on itself and becomes a weapon. Now think of it this way. You're not choosing your life. You're deleting every other one. Click, click, click. Choice becomes violence. A slow erasure of your alternate selves. And somewhere deep in your subconscious, you begin to hate it. That's why you leave texts unanswered. Why you keep 20 tabs open. Why you ghost, delay, defer, procrastinate. Because the moment you choose, something dies. And you're the executioner. But it gets worse. Sometimes, you make the right choice. You marry the love of your life. You accept the perfect job. You find your path, and yet, there's still that whisper. What if I chose differently? What if the better version of me is the one I didn't become? And even in joy, there's rot. Because happiness doesn't silence the mirror. It makes it louder. Because now you fear loss, now you fear regret, now you fear undoing the perfect decision. Choice becomes a chain. You thought you were free, but freedom was the bait, and now you're caught in an endless loop of what-ifs. This is the paradox of choice, where the more paths you see, the less you can walk. In consumer psychology, this paradox shows up in experiments. Give people 30 options for jam, and they're less likely to buy one. Give them 3, and they choose with satisfaction. Why? Because with fewer options, we don't agonize. We don't fantasize about the perfect decision. We act, but life isn't jam. Life is blood and tears and identity and fate. And when you think about your future, your career, your partner, your meaning, you aren't trying to choose. You're trying to avoid the guilt of choosing wrong, so you stall, you scroll, you dream of signs. You let time choose for you, but that too is a choice. Even in inaction, you are sculpting your path, slowly, painfully, with trembling hands. And then you look back. You see a life shaped not by will, but by fear. And you wonder, did I ever really decide anything at all? Or was I just swept downstream by the illusion of agency? So now stand again in the White Room. The doors are still there, but they are closing, one by one, and the longer you wait, the fewer remain. But your hands still hesitate, because no matter which one you open, you'll always wonder what was behind the others. So ask yourself, is it better to choose and mourn, or never choose at all, and become the ghost of every life you could have lived? The twin paradox, two twins, born together, identical in every way, until one boards a spaceship. She leaves Earth, accelerates near the speed of light. Years pass for her. She returns, but when she steps out of the ship, her twin is old, decades older, and she is barely aged. This is the twin paradox, and it isn't just science fiction, it's real, verified physics. And it breaks everything you think you know about time, because if time can move faster for you and slower for me, then what is time? What is this thing that ages our skin, burns our youth, and vanishes into memory? The twin paradox is a consequence of Einstein's theory of relativity. When you approach light speed, time doesn't flow the same way. It bends, slows, distorts. The faster you go, the slower time passes for you. So, the twin on Earth lives a normal life, watches the seasons change, gets married, grows old. But the twin in the ship, she experiences maybe 2 years. Same universe, same clock, different outcomes. And here's the paradox. Who was right? Which time is true? If two people can live through different durations of time and still meet again, then time isn't a universal truth. It's a personal experience. It's relative, subjective, warped by speed, warped by gravity, warped by perspective. So what does that make your entire life? You think you're moving forward. You trust that 1 second equals 1 second. You build calendars, schedules, memories. But relativity whispers a darker truth. There is no master clock. There is no single timeline. Only strands, woven, tangled, discordant. Your time is not my time. Your now is not my now. And that's not just poetic. It's mathematical. Imagine you're on a mountain. Your friend is in a valley. Because of gravity's warping effect, your clocks run at slightly different rates. You live faster than them. By fractions of a second, yes, but in deep time, it matters. And now stretch this further. Think of every human being living in their own frame of time, moving through slightly different flows, all believing they share a single moment. But it's a lie. We never truly occupy the same now. We just pretend. And the most terrifying implication? That means time isn't real the way we think it is. It isn't a line. It isn't a loop. It's a field, a lattice, a tangle, and your consciousness is simply skating across it, like a bead on a string that isn't even straight. Now let's bring it closer. If time can stretch and compress based on movement, what happens in your mind? Your perception of time changes constantly. In fear, it slows. In joy, it vanishes. In boredom, it stretches. In dreams, it breaks. 1 minute asleep can feel like hours. A 10-hour flight disappears into 2 blinks. A moment of terror becomes eternity. So what is time, really, if your experience of it is this unreliable? Is there any difference between the twin in space and you during a dream? You both re-emerge into a world that has moved on without you. You both return confused, detached, behind. You see, the twin paradox isn't just about physics, it's about dislocation. It's about realizing that your sense of continuity is a mask, and the mask slips when you see someone you love age faster than you. When the world speeds up and you lag behind, when memory moves like molasses and the future barrels toward you like a train, you start to feel it, don't you? That maybe the reason you feel out of sync with everything is because you're not broken. You're just living in a different clock, one that was wound tighter or looser or sideways. And it explains why we lose people, not just to death, but to time drift. They speed up, we slow down, and suddenly we no longer share the same reality. The worst part? You don't notice the drift until it's too late, until you turn around and they're gone. Years ahead or years behind. The twin paradox isn't a puzzle to solve, it's a warning that you are alone in your timeline. That even when you're with someone, laughing, holding hands, you're both watching clocks that will never match. So the question that lingers, as time splits you from everything you love, what happens when the people you care about no longer exist in your now? And deeper still, if time is not universal, then maybe you never were either. The Sorites Paradox, you pick up a single grain of sand. It's not a heap, you add another. Still not a heap, another, still no. But keep going, add one grain at a time, and eventually you have a heap. Now ask yourself, which grain turned the pile into a heap? This is the Sorites Paradox, the slow, invisible transformation that hides in plain sight. The paradox of gradual change, of thresholds that don't exist until they do. It's not about sand, it's about you. At what moment did you become you? Was it when you learned to speak? When you stopped crying in public? When someone broke your heart? When you gave one in return? You never notice the shift. You just wake up one day and realize you are no longer the person you thought you were. And that is terrifying, because it means identity isn't a moment. It's a slope, a drift, an erosion so slow it becomes invisible, until the past self is a stranger. Look at an old photo of yourself, you see the face, the expression. You know it's you, but something feels distant. Not wrong, just not now. The person in that photo believed different things, loved different people, feared different outcomes. They had no idea what you'd become. Are you still them, or are you a heap of decisions they never imagined? Now expand this beyond the self. Think of relationships. A friendship fades, not with a bang, but with unanswered messages, cancelled plans. A delay in response, each moment too small to notice, but one day it's gone, and you can't point to when. You say we grew apart, but what you mean is we added one grain too many, or worse, we stopped adding them at all. Time works the same way. You don't age in years. You age in unnoticed changes, a slower breath, a forgotten word, a dream that no longer fits. Then one day you say, I'm getting older. But you were aging all along, just not enough per moment to feel it. That's the horror of Sorites. It's not just that transformation is gradual, it's that you never know when it happened. Was it the 5th drink that made you an alcoholic? The 100th angry glance that made love collapse? The 10th missed bedtime that made you a stranger to your child? Where was the line? There is none. And yet, everything changes. This paradox shatters your illusion of thresholds. There is no final straw, only the lie that it was the last one. Now let's talk about decay. When does something become ruined? The first crack in a dam or the moment it breaks? When does trust disappear after the first lie, the 5th, the 1000th small betrayal? And if you can't see the change as it happens, how can you stop it? How can you fix what you don't notice breaking? You can't, because the Sorites Paradox reveals the cruelest truth of all. We never fall all at once. We fall in increments. In mornings we don't stretch. In words we don't say. In tiny moments we give away without knowing we'll never get them back. And by the time we realize what's gone, it's already sand. You tell yourself this doesn't matter. This is just one time. This won't change anything. But it does. It always does. Because life is not made of big moments. It's made of grains. And every single one adds weight. Until the balance shifts, until the not yet becomes the too late. So now ask yourself, what are you adding to your heap today? And more urgently, which moment, unnoticed and silent, will be the one you look back on as the day everything quietly became something else? The information paradox: you burn a book. Its pages curl, ink turns to ash, smoke dissolves into the air, and just like that, the story is gone. Or is it? This is the information paradox, and it might be the most disturbing truth that physics, consciousness, and time have ever conspired to hide from you. The paradox begins with fire, but ends at the edge of a black hole. You see, physics has rules, sacred ones. One of them is conservation of information. It says that information, the physical configuration of a system, cannot be destroyed. It can change, be scrambled, hidden, but not lost. Every atom's position, every particle's momentum, every whisper of energy, it all leaves a trace like footprints in a field. Erase the feet and the prints remain, but then came the black hole, the devourer, the terminator of light, of mass, of meaning. Stephen Hawking showed that black holes aren't completely black. They emit faint radiation, Hawking radiation caused by quantum effects at the event horizon, and eventually they evaporate, they vanish, leaving behind nothing, no ash, no echo, no record, and with them, the information of everything they swallowed, gone, a planet, a poet, a star, all fed into a hole and obliterated. But that's impossible. Physics says information must be conserved. Quantum mechanics demands it. So how can a black hole delete the universe's memory? How can it destroy the record of being? And now shift the question inward. What about you? If your mind is made of information, your identity, your thoughts, your memories, what happens when you are deleted? When your neurons decay? When the synapses dissolve? When time erodes your brain into meat and dust? Where does your information go? Does it survive? Is it scattered like signals in space, encrypted in entropy, or does it vanish? Just like everything else, now ask something deeper. What if your thoughts are already missing? Imagine every second of your life leaves behind a trace, but you only carry a fraction of those moments. The rest, forgotten, overwritten, compressed. Are they gone? Or simply unreadable? Is your consciousness a system with leaky memory? Not because of biological limitation, but because information at its core is unstable. If your identity is data, then memory loss is a form of data corruption, and selfhood becomes a glitchy archive, scratched, fragmented, decaying with time. Here's where it gets horrifying: when a black hole evaporates and its mass radiates into nothing. Does it matter what it once was? A child, a cathedral, a kiss, a planet gone? And yet it was once something. Is that different from you? If your past evaporates in the furnace of time, do you still matter, or are you already mid-collapse? A black hole in reverse, leaking information, forgetting, unraveling, forgetting again, and maybe, just maybe. There's a reason you can't remember being a child, not just biology, but because that information, that version of you, has already fallen past the event horizon. You don't just forget. You lose the version of yourself who remembered, and the paradox blooms. If you forget something entirely, and no one else remembers it, did it ever happen? And if it didn't, who were you then? Information is supposed to be forever, but in practice it fades. The scent of someone you loved, the name of a favorite song, the real reason you cried that night 10 years ago. You reach for it. Nothing, it's not just lost, it's annihilated, erased like matter on the edge of a singularity. So if your story can be deleted, what makes it any more real than the book? You burned, and if the universe can't even remember the stars it swallowed, who's going to remember you? The observer's paradox: you step into a room filled with mirrors, not just on the walls, on the ceiling, the floor, floating midair. And in every direction, you see yourself, watching yourself. Now blink, because the moment you begin to observe, everything changes. This is the observer's paradox, a mind trap where your very act of watching alters what is being watched. At first glance, it's a linguistic or social curiosity, like when a researcher studying how people speak ends up changing their speech just by listening, or when a stranger with a camera makes a protester self-conscious. But go deeper, go quantum. In physics, this paradox becomes lethal. In the famous double-slit experiment, a particle, say an electron, is fired at a screen through two slits. When unobserved, it acts like a wave. It travels through both slits simultaneously, creating an interference pattern on the screen. But the moment someone tries to observe which slit it passes through, the wave collapses, the particle picks aside, and the interference disappears. It behaves like a particle again. Why? Why does reality change when it knows it's being watched? And now, the deeper horror. What if reality is never real until someone observes it? That would mean your life, your entire experience, is dependent on being perceived. But by who? Is there a cosmic camera pointed at you? Or is it your own awareness that's collapsing the wave? If so, then you are the observer. But also the observed. The trap tightens because once you observe yourself observing, who then is watching that? You can spiral forever in a recursive loop, a self watching a self watching a self. Each observation collapsing a version of the self that might have been. Try it now. Think of your own thoughts. Now think of the thought. That just noticed that thought. Now the one behind that, where does it end? You realize it doesn't. There's no final observer. Just an endless series of masks. You are a hall of mirrors. Each time you think you've reached the real you, the one in charge, you discover it was just another reflection, just another illusion. You think, I am observing my life. But what? If that thought is being observed too? What if you only exist because some version of you is watching you? And if that's true, then consciousness isn't linear. It's recursive. It feeds itself, it devours itself. Even time becomes suspect. What if time doesn't move forward unless it's being perceived? What if the arrow of time isn't real unless someone is there to track it? Maybe the universe isn't ticking like a watch. Maybe it's flickering like a motion-activated light, appearing, disappearing, on and off, until you look, and then it pretends it was always there. This is the reality we inhabit, a stage that assembles itself only when the actor walks in, a world that materializes under your gaze and dissolves behind your back. And maybe that's why you feel watched, even when you're alone, because on some level, the universe is watching you. It has to. Otherwise, you might vanish, and in turn, you keep watching yourself, checking the mirror, recording your memories, playing your life back like a movie only you can view, because if no one's watching, then did it happen? If a moment passes unobserved, was it ever real? So here is your haunting question tonight. If you close your eyes and no one else is there to see you, do you still exist, or are you only real when someone or something is watching? The Grandfather Paradox, you find yourself holding a time machine. The instructions are clear. Go back one generation, find your grandfather before he meets your grandmother, and eliminate him. Just one action, one moment. Erase the man, erase the bloodline. You press the button, but something stops you. Not guilt, not ethics, but logic. Because if you kill him, you were never born. And if you were never born, you couldn't have gone back in time to kill him. This is the Grandfather Paradox, perhaps the most iconic, terrifying tangle in the time travel. Web.A paradox, where causality loops in on itself, slashing its own throat. It's more than a contradiction. It's a conceptual weapon, one that threatens the structure of not just time, but identity, memory, and reason. Let's unpack it. If you succeed in altering the past so drastically that you prevent your own existence, then who pulled the trigger? Who time traveled? Who held the weapon? Who made the choice? But if you fail, if you go back and don't kill him, then time remains unchanged. You were always destined to go back, to hesitate, to fail. Destiny becomes fixed. Free will becomes a joke. Either you're trapped in a timeline that cannot be altered, or you break it and unravel the logic of your own being. Neither option is comforting. Now think deeper. This paradox isn't limited to murder. It applies to any moment of significant change. You save someone who should have died. You introduce an idea before its time. You create a ripple, and that ripple becomes your own undoing. But how can a cause eliminate its effect? And how can an effect rewrite its cause? Time was never meant to be touched. Yet here you are, dreaming of levers and buttons, wishing to change the past. Regret is the most common fuel for this paradox. So ask yourself, what would you go back to undo? A word you spoke, a hand you didn't hold, a moment you let slip? But if you erase that moment, then the version of you who regrets it no longer exists. So, who even made the decision to go back? This is the wound of the grandfather paradox. Regret leads to annihilation. To fix your past is to kill the self who desired the fix. Time is built on cause and effect, this, then that. But this paradox reminds you, the line can fold, and the Lupin will strangle you. Let's go further. Some theories try to resolve the paradox with multiple timelines. You kill your grandfather, but it creates a new branch, a new universe. You don't cease to exist, you simply step out of your original timeline into another. Comforting? Maybe. But it comes with a price. There are infinite yous, infinite failures, infinite regrets, infinite deaths. And the you reading this right now might already be a copy, the echo of a decision you didn't know you made, a branch that doesn't remember its root, and that's the real horror. Not that you'll stop existing, but that you already have, and you just haven't realized it. Yet you were born of paradox, a thought that couldn't be thought, a moment that couldn't be lived, and every choice you make now might be erasing a version of you who was never meant to be. So the next time you wish to undo your past, to remove a wound, to erase a scar, ask yourself this: if the pain made you who you are, and you undo it, then who exactly is wishing? To go back? And deeper still, if time is fragile enough to collapse on contradiction, how many of you are already trapped in timelines that shouldn't exist? The paradox of the self-destruct. A red button sits in a sealed room. You're told it will end everything, the world, the universe, time itself. You're also told you have the freedom to press it. There's no trick, no alarm, just one. Rule once pressed, there's no coming back. Now here's the paradox. You will never press it, but not because you don't want to, not because you're afraid, because the mere possibility of pressing it is what holds your reality together. This is the paradox of the self-destruct button, where the option to destroy becomes the thing that prevents destruction, where the threat of collapse is the scaffold that keeps the building upright. Let's break it down. Imagine a system, a machine, a society, a consciousness that contains within it a kill switch, a way to end itself. If it removes that switch, it becomes invincible, but also unfree, because without the option to end, to exit, to undo, what is freedom? Now reverse it. If the kill switch is active, you can end everything, but you won't, because to preserve meaning, you must preserve the system. To preserve the system, you must preserve the possibility of ending it. It's circular, fragile, a noose you wear as a necklace. Let's bring it inward. Have you ever wanted to disappear? You don't act on it, but you think it. The thought flickers across your mind like a shadow on a cave wall, not because you're broken, but because somewhere deep down, your existence is built on the edge of maybe not existing. And without that edge, your identity would implode. Because if you were trapped here truly with no option of escape, you would lose your mind. So instead, your brain offers you the illusion of the red button. You could walk away. You could end it. You don't have to stay, you never press it, but you need it there to breathe, to continue. Now zoom out. A country stockpiles weapons it will never use. A prisoner guards a poison he will never drink. A consciousness builds a door it will never open. But the knowledge of that door gives the illusion of choice. And the illusion is enough. You walk forward not because the path is perfect, but because you could leave it even if you never will. Now here's the deeper trap. You start to wonder if that red button is even real. What if it's a lie? What if it's been disconnected? What if the threat of collapse is just another system of control? Suddenly, you're not sure if you're free, or just playing a role in someone else's idea of freedom. And the paradox sharpens because to test the button, you'd have to press it, and if it works, you're gone, and if it doesn't, you've proven your prison. But either way, you're not the same after. You were never meant to push it. You were only meant to live with it, and so you continue, carrying the possibility of destruction as your only comfort, carrying the shadow of escape like a compass that never points anywhere, because sometimes meaning is only possible when you know you could abandon it. Sometimes time only matters because you could end it. And so the red button sits, untouched, necessary, terrifying, a symbol, a mirror. So ask yourself, are you truly choosing life, or just avoiding the consequences of testing the exit? And deeper still, what if the button isn't real, and you've never been free at all? The paradox of these words right now, you're reading this right now, but what does that mean exactly? Because these words, they aren't happening in the present. They were written before you arrived, scripted, typed, stored, a trail of black. Symbols sitting dormant until your eyes scan them. So here's the paradox. If you're experiencing these words in the now, but they were written in the past, then where is the present really happening? This is the paradox of these words right now. A trap so intimate you won't even notice it's already closed around you. Let's look closer. Right now you feel like this moment is unfolding organically. Your eyes move across each line. Your brain processes, decodes, absorbs. You believe in flow, in movement. But in truth, this text is frozen, dead. The sentence you're reading was sitting here all along, waiting. For you, it did not change. You did. So the illusion of now that this is happening in real time is just that, an illusion. Because even your present experience is an encounter with the past, every word, every thought, every breath. But it gets worse, because the moment you finish reading this sentence, it's already gone. And now it lives in memory, an echo of something you just experienced, but can never return to. Even as you try to reread, your state has shifted. The first reading is unreachable. The second is haunted by memory. The third, by analysis. The now is never now again. Every now is already an artifact. And the terrifying question becomes, are you living your life the same way? Processing the illusion of newness while only encountering remnants. What if all of time is structured like this page? Already written, already set. You aren't moving through time. You're moving through pre-written sequences, experiencing them in the order your brain interprets. You're not changing reality. You're flipping through a cosmic book, one line at a time, believing the story is being told as you read it. But the ending is already printed. You just haven't turned the page. Now ask, who wrote it? Was it you? God? The universe? An author you'll never meet, or worse? Was it no one? Is this entire journey, this life, this timeline, this text, simply an emergent property of meaningless data arranged into patterns? You say, no, I choose how I read, I can stop. Can you try it? Stop reading. Yet here you are, still inside the moment, still trapped in the flow of predetermined words, calling it now, calling it choice, calling it me. And deeper still, ask yourself, how many of your thoughts, reactions, and decisions are really your own? You say, that line hit me, but it didn't hit. It waited. It sat dormant until your unique convergence of thought and timing gave it power. So was it the words that had meaning, or was it you who brought meaning to them? If this sentence means something to you, was it always meant to? Did the moment exist before you arrived? Did this now wait for you? Or were you dragged into it one step at a time with no say in where you were going? This is the paradox. Every now you experience is scripted, but it feels alive. Every word is static, but it feels like it's unfolding. Every moment is already behind you by the time you notice it. And so you live your entire life a few milliseconds behind, always watching the play, never aware you're not in it but in the audience. So now, yes, now ask, if everything you're experiencing is already written, then what part of you still believes you're making it up? As you go, the paradox of eternal return, you wake up. The room looks the same, the light, the air, the slow blink of morning. Something feels familiar, too familiar, not like déjà vu, more like repetition, but not of yesterday, of forever. This is the paradox of eternal return, a nightmare wrapped in logic, an ancient thought trap that whispers, what if this moment has happened before, and will happen again, and again and again forever? The concept was born from ancient philosophy, reborn through Friedrich Nietzsche, and now lingers in the dark halls of cosmology. The idea is simple and terrifying. If time is infinite and the universe is finite, then everything must eventually repeat. Not just similar things, not just echoes, but identical lives replayed exactly as before. This version of you reading this exact sentence, in this exact tone of thought, would recur an infinite number of times, an infinite number of yous, sitting in the same body, thinking the same thought, making the same mistake, loving the same impossible person, over and over and over. And you would never know, because each version believes this life is the first. Each version cries like it's original. Each version begs like it has never begged before. Each version dies like it has never died, but it has billions of times. The pain you feel right now, you've already felt it, and you'll feel it again. The joy, already tasted, fated to return, and the choices you believe are yours. They were always going to happen, and they always will. You scream, "No, I have free will." But that scream too is part of the loop, predicted, preserved, replayed. You are an echo in a mirror, and the mirror is infinite. Now ask, could this be true? Physics doesn't deny it. Some interpretations of thermodynamics, quantum recurrence, and multiverse theory all suggest that given enough time, every state of the universe can recur. Entropy may increase, but given infinite iterations, even the most chaotic state will eventually cycle back to order. Eventually you return, and so does everyone you've ever lost. And yet, this isn't hope, it's horror. Because you don't come back with awareness, you don't retain your wisdom. You don't improve, you just repeat. Flaw for flaw, kiss for kiss, mistake for mistake. You become a ritual, not a journey, a script, not a soul. You are not evolving, you are looping. And if that's true, then why try? Why change? Why strive for meaning when the ending is written and will be played again on loop with the exact same failures? Nietzsche asked, would you live your life over exactly as it is for eternity? And most people would not. But here's the deeper curse. Even if you wanted to resist the loop, even if you chose to stop, that desire is part of the script. You were always going to try. You were always going to fail. You were always going to forget. Your entire existence may be a cosmic stutter, a moment so small in the face of eternity, yet cruel enough to be inflicted again and again. You might think you're free, but freedom loses its meaning when everything returns. You might think you're special, but uniqueness collapses when your story is indistinguishable from a trillion others. You might think you're changing, but change becomes meaningless in the face of eternal repetition. And the worst part? This very moment, this exact sentence might have been the one that woke you up in 1,000 past loops, and still, you forgot. So now ask, if your life repeats forever, and you never remember, was it ever yours to begin with? And deeper still, what if you're not just reliving your life, but someone else's? The paradox of Sleeping Beauty. A woman is put to sleep on Sunday. She's told, a fair coin will be flipped once. If it lands heads, she'll be awakened on Monday, then put back to sleep with her memory erased. If it lands tails, she'll be awakened on Monday and Tuesday. Each time with her memory erased, she wakes. She doesn't know what day it is. She doesn't know how many times she's already woken up. She asks herself, what is the probability the coin landed heads? Intuitively, you might say 50-50, one flip, one result. But the deeper you go, the more uncertain the ground becomes. This is the Sleeping Beauty paradox, and it's a puzzle not just of probability, but of subjective time, and how your awareness of time distorts reality itself. Because here's the catch. If the coin landed heads, Beauty is woken once. If it landed tails, she is woken twice with no memory of the first. So from Beauty's perspective, she must ask, am I in a one-wake timeline or a two-wake timeline? If she wakes randomly, and there are two opportunities for tails but only one for heads, then shouldn't she reason, there's a 2 in 3 chance I'm in a tails universe? And now your mind begins to fracture, because this isn't just about coins, this is about you. How many times have you woken up? How many days, identical in thought, mood, routine, have passed where you never questioned the repetition? And if your memory resets every morning, how would you know you could be living in a loop, waking up in the same moment again and again, and never noticing. You could be Sleeping Beauty right now, trapped in a structure that doesn't show you all its pieces, trapped in epistemic darkness. You don't know how many versions of this now have passed. You only know you are aware in this one, but how many others did you sleep through? What's even more disturbing is that the paradox breaks logic itself. Ask one philosopher and they'll say, the answer is 1 to 2. Ask another and they'll say, no, it's 1-3. And both are mathematically correct, depending on whether you count events or experiences. So what is the truth? Is truth based on outcomes or perspectives? And how do you, the observer, separate what's real from what's experienced? Because everything you know, everything you call real comes from inside your head, and your head forgets. It resets, it dreams. Maybe this isn't the first time you've read this. Maybe the you from yesterday also sat here asking these questions, but forgot or never existed. If your experience of time is shaped by what you remember, and your memory is shaped by what you notice, then you are navigating a maze with missing walls. You can't escape it. Because the loop is soft, gentle, unseen, and every morning you open your eyes and you assume the clock has moved forward. But what if it hasn't? What if your consciousness is simply looping through probabilistic awareness? You remember this moment, but not the 1,000 others like it, because you weren't awake for those, or you were and forgot, or you were never meant to know. So here's the final horror. What if memory is the only proof of time and you've been living hundreds of versions of today without ever realizing you were stuck? You call this Monday. But are you sure? Are you really sure? Because if Sleeping Beauty's paradox is correct, then your certainty is just a trick of which moment you happen to wake up in. So ask yourself, what if you've lived this day already and simply don't remember all the other times you made the same choice wrongly? The Bifurcation Paradox, you make a choice. Turn left, not right. Say yes instead of no. You think the path diverges once, clean, binary, but the truth is darker. Every decision doesn't split time in two. It splits it in infinite directions. This is the Bifurcation Paradox, where every choice fractures reality into countless shards, each one unfolding a separate you, not two timelines, but thousands, millions. And the paradox? You can never know what you've missed. Not because it's forgotten, but because you never had access to the other lives in the first place. Every decision creates a universe where it was never made. That version of you who dropped out of school, they exist. The one who became a musician, they breathe. The one who kissed the person you hesitated to speak to, they never stopped smiling, and none of them know you exist. Now the trap closes. Because if reality bifurcates infinitely, then every moment of hesitation, every flicker of regret, becomes not just a lost possibility, but a living version of reality that you'll never meet. And you, reading this now, might be the least fortunate version of yourself. You might be the one who failed, the one who didn't take the leap, the one who got stuck. But the paradox doesn't stop there. What if every decision you think you're making freely is already encoded in the branching structure of time? Like a tree growing, every branch was always going to happen. It just needed a leaf, you to ride it, so you're not choosing your path. You're merely awakening inside one that already unfolded. Your life as you experience it is one thread, a lonely sliver of a tapestry too vast to ever grasp. And here's the deeper horror. The you in the other timelines doesn't know you exist either. They don't mourn your losses. They don't envy your victories. You are not part of their story, and they are not part of yours. You might wonder, what's the problem? Isn't this just a multiverse? But the paradox is about epistemic isolation. You are forever cut off from your other selves. You will never know what you missed, never feel what other versions of you are feeling, and you'll forever imagine that their lives are better, that somewhere the real you is succeeding, loving, thriving, free. That belief is comforting, but it also hurts, because it turns your life into a lesser draft, a discarded edit, the version of the film that didn't get picked, and yet you're still here, still living, still believing that this version matters. So here's the question. If all paths exist, then what gives this one meaning? You're trapped in a timeline that feels chosen, but it wasn't. It just happened to be the one your awareness woke up inside, and that changes everything. Because regret is no longer about what you didn't do. It's about the fact that you did it in one line and not in others. And suddenly you're mourning ghosts of yourself, futures you'll never visit, sons you'll never see, children you never had, versions of your face that will age into strangers. You will always wonder, was this the best possible version of me? And the answer, you'll never know, because every moment you try to chase another path, another version of yourself, you abandon the one you're living. And yet, even in that abandonment, you're creating new branches, more splits, more silence, more selves. So ask yourself, are you the original? Or just one of many shadows reaching for a light that was never meant to fall on your face? And deeper still, if you could step into another version of your life, would you be willing to erase the one you're in now forever? The paradox of the arrow of time: you drop a glass, it shatters, irreversible, irretrievable. But what if you played the tape backward? Every shard lifts, reassembles, flies into your hand. It's perfectly possible, mathematically. Every law of physics works in reverse. So here's the paradox. If time's fundamental equations are symmetrical, why does it only flow forward? This is the paradox of the arrow of time, where the laws of reality bow to no direction. But you are shackled to one, from birth to death, from cause to effect, from memory to forgetting. You never go back. But why? Let's start with what we know. In physics, the laws that govern particles, Newtonian mechanics, quantum equations, Maxwell's laws, are time reversible. If you reverse the direction of time in these equations, they still hold. There's no preference for past or future. And yet, your experience tells a different story. You remember yesterday, you don't remember tomorrow, you age, you decay, you die. Entropy increases. The universe moves from order to disorder, from structure to chaos, from flame to ash. And this one asymmetry, this single irreversible direction, is the only thing that makes time feel real. It's called the thermodynamic arrow. Entropy rises, and with it your sense of time. But entropy is not time. It's just the record of difference. So now the trap tightens. What if time isn't moving forward? What if entropy is just your brain creating an illusion of flow? Because it has no way to function otherwise. Your brain writes memory in one direction, not because that's how time moves, but because it's the only way you can exist. You are a pattern of increasing entropy, and anything else would destroy your cognition. A reverse you, remembering the future and forgetting the past, is possible by the laws of physics, but impossible by the laws of yourself. You are directional. You are an arrow forged by necessity. And maybe that's all you are. Not a soul, not a consciousness. Just an emergent illusion of time-bound memory, held together by decay. Now consider this. If time flows only forward for you, what happens when it ends? Will it stop or simply reverse? In a distant future, the universe may collapse, reverse its expansion. Entropy might decrease. Would time reverse too? Time. Would you live backward? Would you remember death before birth? Would you apologize before you hurt someone? Would you unsay the things you regret? Would you start to heal the wounds before you bled? And if so, would you notice? Or would the reversed arrow of time feel just as normal to you, because your brain would adjust its frame accordingly? Suddenly, time's direction becomes meaningless. All you have is the illusion of one foot in front of the other, but the floor beneath, it doesn't care what direction you walk. It never did. Even memory, your final anchor to the present, isn't. Safe, you trust it. You call it linear. But how often have you remembered something differently? How often has your past changed, not because it happened differently, but because you changed? Maybe the arrow of time isn't straight. Maybe it's spiral. High staircase with no top, no bottom, just dizziness. Or maybe it's fake. Maybe time doesn't flow at all. Maybe everything, every moment, already exists. And you, like a flashlight in a dark room, only illuminate one frame at a time. You, Think you're moving, but you're just scrolling. This is the arrow of time paradox, a life that feels like a march, but might be a loop, a line, a flicker, a lie. So ask yourself, if everything in the universe works both forward and backward, why are you so certain that you are facing the right direction? And deeper still, if your sense of time is just a side effect of decay, then what part of you remains when there is nothing left to break? The paradox of the first moment. Close your eyes. Imagine the very beginning, not of your day, not of your life, not of your planet, but the beginning of everything. The first second, the first tick of the universal clock, the moment before time began. Wait, already, you feel it, don't you? That sharp sting of contradiction, because if there was a before time, then time had already begun. This is the paradox of the first moment. A void so absolute, so untouchable, that even asking the question collapses the ground beneath. You're told there was a big bang, a singularity, an explosion, not of matter into space, but of space itself. Time erupted like a wound, but here's the catch. If time began at that point, then what caused it? To cause implies had before, but before time? There was no before. You can't have a when without a was, and yet something must have happened, or must it? Maybe time didn't begin at all, maybe it was always here. Or maybe it's just how your mind interprets change, not an actual substance with a beginning or end. Imagine a book. Its first page is numbered 1. But that number only exists because you wrote it down. What existed before that page? The paper? The thought? The author? Now ask, what existed before time had a number? Some physicists argue time is emergent. It arises only when particles interact, when change happens, when information is exchanged. In this view, the universe doesn't start with time. Time appears when enough complexity forms to measure difference. But then, what started complexity? Others say time is cyclical, that there was no first moment, just an eternal recurrence of expansions and collapses, a heartbeat, a cosmic breath. But that doesn't resolve the paradox. It just buries the question inside infinity. And infinity, too, is a trap. Because if there was no first moment, then time never began. And if time never began, how can you be inside it now? You start to feel it. The creeping nausea, the mental vertigo of asking a question that has no anchor. The first moment is a paradox not because we lack information, but because our minds are not equipped to process the concept of no time. Your entire experience is grounded in sequence. One thing leads to another. Moments unfold. So when you're asked to imagine a moment that had no before, your brain panics. It fills the void with myth, metaphor, creation stories, laws, because nothingness isn't just empty, it's incompatible with human perception. And yet here we are, you, this text, this moment, all perched on the edge of a first moment that may never have happened. What if the first moment was not the beginning of time, but the birth of awareness? What if time only began when something looked back and said, I exist? And if so, then time is not a feature of the universe. It's a feature of you, a way to make sense of being, a map that didn't exist until someone picked up a pen. So ask yourself, is time a thing that started, or just the name you give to your desperate need for beginnings? And deeper still, if you could find the first moment, would you discover truth, or would everything unravel because there was never a moment to begin with? The paradox of the unfinished thought you're thinking. Right now, halfway through a sentence in your mind, not quite spoken, not quite formed, just hovering on the edge of language. You feel it, don't you? That unfinished thought, the one that started but never found its end. You move on, distracted. The thought fades, but not entirely. It lingers, a whisper behind the noise. This is the paradox of the unfinished thought, a trap not of logic, but of consciousness. A quiet recursion where every mental fragment becomes a timeline, unfinished, yet never truly gone. You assume your mind is clean, that one thought ends before another begins. But in truth, your thoughts bleed. Every conversation you didn't finish, Every idea you didn't chase, every feeling you pushed aside, and they don't disappear, they fracture. They split, and each fragment becomes a paradox. What is the timeline of a thought that never ends? Let's go deeper. You're reading this, and within you, responses form. Interesting. Dark. True. You consider replying, you imagine saying something out loud, but you don't. The sentence in your head never leaves your mouth. Was it ever real? Now multiply this. Every single day, you have 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts. But how many do you complete? 100, a few dozen? The rest unfinished, dangling in the abyss of your neural circuits, like tabs you forgot to close, like notes you never returned to, ghosts of your mental landscape. But here's the paradox. If a thought never finishes, how do you know it didn't matter? Maybe the idea you just let go was the one that would have changed everything, but it never got to mature. It never got to speak. You aborted it, not out of malice, but because time doesn't wait for slow thoughts, and so you stack them. Thousands, hundreds of thousands. The thoughts you had as a child, the dreams you had while driving, the lines of poetry that died between heartbeats. You forget them, but they don't forget you. They collect in the basement of your being, and at night when your mind drifts, they rise in dreams, in déjà vu, in sudden sadness for no clear reason, and in those moments you feel haunted, not by spirits, but by all the versions of yourself that never finished forming. Every time you said, "I'll think about it later," you left behind a self who waited, and now they are many and they are hungry. Your identity is not a solid wall. It's a scaffolding of half-constructed thoughts, a collage of interrupted monologues. You think you're you because of what you think. But what if you're really the product of what you never completed? Let's test it. Try to remember what you were just thinking before this paragraph began. You can't, can you? It's already slipped. An idea, aborted mid-breath, gone, unresolved, and still it tugs at you. You live in a world where time moves forward, but your mind exists in loops, interrupted loops, unfinished spirals, and maybe that's what anxiety is. Not fear of the future, but the echo of thousands of thoughts still asking to be finished. And maybe that's what guilt is. Not just regret, but the ache of an inner timeline that never got closure. So now ask, how many versions of you are made from the things you almost said, the thoughts you almost followed, the changes you almost made? And deeper still, if your life is a sentence being written, who is the one that keeps hitting backspace? The paradox of simultaneity. A storm rolls across the sky. Lightning strikes a tree far to the west. A second bolt hits another tree in the east. You stand perfectly centered between them. You see both flashes at once. They happened simultaneously, right? Now, imagine someone watching from a moving train rushing eastward. To them, the eastern strike happens first. But who's right? This is the paradox of simultaneity. A fracture in your most basic assumption about time, that two things can happen at the same time. Einstein shattered that comfort. In special relativity, simultaneity is relative. There is no universal now, only frames of reference. What's simultaneous for you is not simultaneous for someone else, and if that's true, then there is no global present, no shared moment. Time is not a single thread stretched across the universe. It's a knot of perspectives, each one tangled in motion and position. So, let's bring it closer, more personal. You and someone you love stare at the same moon, you whisper the same thought. You believe you're connected in the moment, but from another reference frame, you were never aligned. You reached out to someone who was already in your past. They answered from a moment that, for you, hadn't happened yet. Emotionally, you felt unity. Physically, the universe disagreed, and this fractures something deeper, because the idea of shared time is the foundation of relationships, language, empathy. You say, "I know how you feel." But how can you? You don't know when they felt it. You don't even know when now is. We are time travelers without knowing it. Each of us moving through a space-time that is skewed, curved by our speed, our mass, our distance. You've never. truly met anyone in the same now, only your approximation of it. And that approximation, it's built on delay, light lag, cognitive buffering. Even in conversation, you're not reacting to real time. You're reacting to someone who no longer exists, a version from moments ago. By the time your brain processes their words, that version of them is gone, dead. You've always been speaking to ghosts, so the paradox unfolds. If there is no objective, present, no single universal now, then when exactly do you exist? Where is your moment? You think, here now. But that's just your frame. The world around you, your friends, your past, the stars overhead, all live in slightly different times. You will never align. Even your body is asynchronous. Neural. Signals take time. Your toe is living milliseconds behind your brain. Your body is a collection of biological clocks, never in perfect harmony. And your identity? It's built on the illusion of unity. That all your parts, all your experiences happen together, but they don't. They never did. You are not one moment. You are a symphony of delays, conducted by a conductor who doesn't even exist in one place. So what does that make now? A local hallucination, a stitched patchwork of data from the past, a glitch in a system designed to simulate continuity. And yet, you trust it. You live by it. You build love, sorrow, and joy upon it, even though your now is never the same as anyone else's. So ask yourself, if there is no universal present, only billions of slightly misaligned moments, how can any of us ever truly meet? And, deeper still, what if loneliness isn't emotional, but the inevitable result of each consciousness being trapped in its own private time? The paradox of the silent universe. Listen closely. Really listen. What do you hear? Your breath, the hum of a machine, maybe the ticking of a clock, sounds, signals, feedback. But now imagine stepping outside the Earth into deep space. No sound, no echo, only silence, infinite, suffocating silence. Not because there's nothing there, but because sound needs a medium. It needs air, pressure, vibration. The universe is not quiet because it has nothing to say. It's quiet because there's no one left to hear it. This is the paradox of the silent universe. A haunting dissonance between the activity of existence and the absence of perception. Because everything is happening. Galaxies collide, stars explode. Particles blink into being and vanish again. But without an observer, who is it happening for? You've always assumed that time, like sound, just flows. That even when no one is watching, the clock keeps ticking. But what if it doesn't? What if time is not an engine running in the background, but a performance activated only when something conscious is there to measure it? Quantum theory suggests this isn't just poetic, it's fundamental. Unobserved particles exist in superposition. Not in one place, but in every possible place. Not in one moment, but in a cloud of time. Only when observed, when measured, does the wave collapse into a single state. Only when someone looks does the universe decide where, when, and what it is. And now the paradox breaks through your chest. If time requires an observer, what was the universe doing before we arrived? Was it frozen, undefined, waiting? If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around, does it make a sound? Now ask the darker version. If the Big Bang occurred but nothing conscious emerged, did time ever begin at all? Maybe time is not a river, maybe it's a spotlight, and you are the stage crew, the only one flipping the switch. But now, reverse. And what about after you're gone? What about when there are no minds left to think, no eyes to see, no memories to record? Does the universe continue, or does it fade back into possibility, into pure, silent potential? And if you are the one collapsing the waveform, if your perception is the force that shapes the moment, then what are you? Are you just a receiver? Or are you the creator? Maybe consciousness doesn't ride through time like a passenger. Maybe it creates time as it passes through, a paintbrush, one stroke at a time. Only what it touches becomes real. Now imagine this. Right now, as you sit in this room, the rest of the universe is suspended, not gone, not asleep, just unrendered, waiting for you to look up, waiting for you to dream of stars, waiting to exist. And In that terrifying intimacy, you realize you are not in the universe is in you. Its silence is not emptiness, it's potential. It's the moment before sound, the pause in a heartbeat, the inhale before the scream. So now ask, if you are the one giving time a voice. What happens when you stop listening? And deeper still, if the universe only awakens through your perception? Then when you close your eyes, does everything else go dark too? The paradox of the last second. It's almost over, but you don't know when, because there is no clock for the last second, no alarm, no voice from the heavens to whisper, "This is it." This is the paradox of the last second. A final quiet, impossibility. If every second you live could be your last, how can you ever know when to treat it as such? You are living, breathing, planning, as if there is more time. But you don't know. You never know. You only assume. You assume tomorrow. You assume dinner. You assume the next breath. And the paradox lives in that assumption. The very act of planning for the future is based on a reality that may not include it. You prepare for moments you might never reach. You fantasize about decades you might never. See? You replay arguments that will never be resolved and mourn wounds that time may never be allowed to heal. But the last second, it arrives with no fanfare, and it will not wait for you to understand. One heartbeat, then none. One inhale, then darkness. Even now as you read this, you're betting that another sentence will follow. And so far you've been right. But one day you won't be. One day your story will be interrupted. A sentence mid-thought, an emotion mid-rise, a goodbye never spoken. And here's where the paradox deepens. If you knew this was your last second, what would you change? Would you forgive? Would you run? Would you confess? But if the second passes and death doesn't come, do you resume the illusion of infinity? You see, you can't live every moment like your last. You'd go mad, you'd burn out. And yet to live without acknowledging that any moment could be your final one is to live in denial. So you do both. You ignore and you fear. You fantasize about control, even as the seconds slip silently away. Every clock on your wall lies to you, not because it's inaccurate, but because it pretends the future is guaranteed. And this is the unbearable tension. Time only feels linear because you believe it will continue. You live in a line, but you die at a point. The final second contains the entire collapse of time. And it doesn't look different, it doesn't feel different, it simply happens. And then, no more next. So now sit with this. You may have already passed the most important second of your life without realizing it. You may be living in the epilogue thinking you're in the middle. You may be approaching the last second now, but you don't know. And you never will until it's gone. And even then, you won't be the one to know. So ask yourself, if every second contains the potential to be the last, what should this one mean? And deeper still, if meaning itself vanishes with you, then what, if anything, survives that final breath of time? The paradox of escaping the trap you followed the trail. One thought after another, one fracture of reality folded into the next. You've stepped through illusion, stared into recursion, tasted the metal of dread on the back of your tongue, and now here we are, at the door marked escape. But before you reach for the handle, ask, what if there is no way out? What if the trap was never meant to be escaped, only realized? This is the paradox of escaping the trap, the final recursive loop. It promises salvation but circles you back to the beginning. Because the idea of escape implies freedom, and freedom implies distance from the thing you're trapped in. But time doesn't give you distance, it carries you. And the deeper paradox is this: to escape the trap of time, you would have to step outside of it. But how can a being made of time, whose very thoughts unfold in time, ever leave? The mouse doesn't escape the maze, it only imagines a door. You've tried everything: rationality, philosophy, science, faith. You've asked whether the present exists, whether the past was real, whether the future is already written. You've stared into the eyes of infinite versions of yourself, versions dreaming, dying, choosing, fracturing. And now, you want to be free, but you can't be. Not entirely. because the one demanding escape is built by the structure they're trying to leave. Your mind is a mechanism of measurement. It measures time like a clock measures hours, but a clock cannot clock itself, and neither can you. You try to think outside of time, but to think is to unfold across moments. You try to imagine timelessness, but imagination itself flows in sequence. You are the trap. So here's the most unsettling realization of all. There is no outside, there is no edge of time, no sky above the maze. No vantage point where you can stand and declare, I have escaped. Because the only thing that ever wanted to escape was your illusion of control. And when that dissolves, when you stop struggling, stop resisting, stop searching for the hidden door, you see the trap for what it is. A mirror you weren't meant to escape. You were meant to see, to notice, to feel the shape of the cage, to realize that the trap doesn't kill you. Denial does. Maybe freedom isn't leaving the labyrinth. Maybe it's loving it, living in it fully, breathing into every twist, every crack, every paradox, because if this moment is all there is, and if time won't let you out, then you only have one move left. Stay, and become aware. That is the only escape time allows. Not backwards, not forward, not beyond, but within. So now, as the final page of this mental descent turns, and the echo of the last paradox fades, ask yourself, if the only thing keeping you trapped was the belief that you were supposed to escape, then are you still a prisoner? And deeper still, if the trap is all there is and you are conscious inside it, then perhaps you were never trapped at all.